Okay guys, so I've been working on my video where I'm going to explain to you everything about how Michael escapes the end of Halloween 2018. But yesterday I got to go check out the premiere of this new movie called Midsommar, and I just had to tell you about it before I finish up that other video. You've probably already heard of Midsommar, but if you haven't, it's the new movie from a guy named Ari Aster, who you might know from last year's breakout horror hit Hereditary. If you're wondering what kind of horror movie it is, it falls in line with other stuff that A24 puts out, like The Witch. Basically, if you had to file it down under a genre, it would be folk horror. The main character in Midsommar is a girl named Dani who's in a relationship with a guy named Christian, and it's really clear right from the beginning of this movie that they need to break up. Like, they seriously need to break up. It's also clear that Christian is definitely aware of this, but right when he gets to his breaking point where his friends convince him that dumping Dani is the right thing to do, something really bad happens to Dani and he decides to stick it out, just to be there for her. The real problem is that Christian has a trip planned with his friends Mark, Josh, and Pele to go out to the Swedish countryside where Pele grew up for about a month and a half that summer. The reason they're going is because the village is celebrating a summer solstice and a festival that happens only once every 90 years. And yeah, that's why it's called Midsommar. I don't know if I need to say this, but this movie had a lot riding on it. It's in a similar situation to Jordan Peele's Us, which came out earlier this year. That's because him and Ari Aster are both filmmakers who have had the term masterpiece thrown around about their first movie, and then they both took on the monumental task of following it up in a meaningful way. For some reason, even though it has a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes at the time of recording this, Midsommar is already being called divisive, which I don't really understand. I think it really comes down to the fact that it's a daytime horror movie, like none of the stuff that happens in this movie really happens at night, but regardless, I think Aster nailed his sophomore effort much harder than Jordan Peele did. If you're wondering what kind of structure this movie has, it's actually very similar to Hereditary, in the sense that it's piling dread on you for its 2-hour and 40-minute runtime, and then it tosses in just little bits of practical gore and disturbing imagery here and there to keep you sharp. And it also has a phenomenal actress in the lead role. In Hereditary, we had the grieving mother Toni Collette, and this time around we have the much younger Florence Pugh, but she is carrying just as much grief, if not a little bit more, on her shoulders throughout the entire movie. But for me personally, Pugh is more relatable this time around because not only is she closer to my age, but she's also clinging on to a dying relationship at a really troubling time in her life, and that really hit home for me. Comparing their performances is like splitting hairs though, so what you really need to know is that she is phenomenal. What Ari Aster is essentially doing with this movie is taking the same recipe he used to make Hereditary and adding in a few new ingredients that make it taste just a little bit better. The first, of course, is the relatability of Dani, who is on the verge of a complete and total mental breakdown. He's taking that and combining it with the isolation that comes from the fact that you're out in the middle of nowhere in a foreign country and the people that you should be able to rely on are constantly dropping the ball, and then the people you realize you can rely on are just disappearing left and right. It's actually pretty terrifying. It's just a fact that there are very few people in this world who can deal with that type of pressure, and the helplessness of it all just crawls under your skin. It's really unsettling. That's the best word I can think of for this movie. And I really do think that if you thought some of the imagery in Hereditary was disturbing, this time around the stuff you're gonna see play out on screen is gonna make you queasy. I mean, just off the top of my head, you not only have close-up gore that's all practical and shown in broad daylight, it absolutely looks incredible, but then you have to throw in this Texas Chainsaw Massacre level body mutilation, and then he upped the quotient on the amount of naked old people this time around by a lot. It was really disturbing to see so many naked old people in this movie. It admittedly started to feel like a lot to process for me, but Aster does a great job at throwing in a lot of anchor points for you to latch on to. Josh is especially important because he's doing his thesis on this summer trip, and specifically this village out in the middle of nowhere. So when things start to get a little confusing, Ari Aster makes sure he asks the right questions so that you get the important information out of the villagers. And then you've got Mark, who's played by Will Poulter, and he's essentially the douchey American tourist. If you're one of my viewers who hates the jokes in Halloween 2018, you might get a little bit triggered here, but he's basically there to provide the humor when things get a little too dark so that you don't feel sensory overload, and I think it works really well. Guys, I'm digging really deep here. My only knock against Midsommar is that the plot is a little bit predictable. Like, you kind of know what's going on from the very beginning as soon as they get to Sweden, but it's the kind of predictability that comes from playing your favorite game a second time. Something like Resident Evil 4 or The Witcher 3. You know what's going to happen in the story, but the story is so good that you don't really care. You're there to experience it even though you know what's going to happen. And underneath this amazing movie from start to finish is a dread-inducing score from the Hacks and Cloak. I think his name is Bobby Kurlick. I don't exactly know how to say his last name, so I'm going to call him the Hacks and Cloak. It's full of plucky strings, sharp breaths, and loud screams. And honestly, guys, this dude needs to do more movies like this. I'd love to see him score something like a Blumhouse movie in the future, because I know we love seeing Bear McCreary, but he's He's done like every horror movie this year. We gotta give that guy a break. Bring in the Haxan Cloak. Let's have him do some more horror movies. So yeah, guys, I definitely cannot recommend seeing Midsommar enough. It's out next week in theaters, and you should go see it in the theaters. I know with these types of movies, people generally like to wait for DVD or seeing it on Redbox or something like that, but this is a movie you should see on the big screen. It's really well shot. The environments are great. They're definitely worth seeing in just big, bright picture directly in front of your eyes, and I just think that experience will make it a little bit scarier for you. I saw Hereditary in theaters last year, and that was something that I highly recommended to a lot of people, and everyone I told to go do that came back to me and said that they enjoyed it. So if you're thinking of seeing Midsommar, don't wait for it to be on DVD. Go see it in the theater. If you needed to be sold a little more, it's got excellent performances, it's got a great score, it's got practical effects, it's got a level of dread on the same level as something like the original Halloween, and for that reason alone, I just absolutely love it. I think it's my favorite movie of 2019 so far, but I definitely need to see it again. If you do go check it out next week, let me know what you think of it down in the comments below, and remember when you subscribe to hit the notification bell, and when you get that notification, make sure you click on it, and do me a huge favor and just watch the video from start to finish. Listen to it like a podcast if you have to, because that's the only way YouTube is going to show it to the rest of my subscribers. Anyway, guys, my name is Jimmy Champane, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.